Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's perfected his doggy door slider. It's John Precoda.
You know, they call it my doggy door slider because of that time that I snuck through the doggy door and got caught in Arizona. So one question for you, Raphie. Do you try to help me or do you run?
I think my heart says help you, but my brain says get the fuck out of there.
Tom Cosgrove, come on.
Yeah, I know, dude. Dude, when Don Orsillo says doggy door slider for the first time, that is going to be my Super Bowl. That is going to be. That's how I'm going to know that like this has entered relevancy in mainstream Padres culture. John, we're here to complete a task that we started last week, which was reviewing the ZiPS projections for the San Diego Padres in 2023, how they looked in the preseason, and how the team is performing compared to them now. We did the hitters last week, so if you're interested in hearing that episode, hit pause. We'll be here when you come back. Don't worry. We'd love it if you check that out because we're going to kind of expound a little bit more in that episode than we will in this episode about kind of what the premise is and everything like that. But you can kind of get the gist from what I just said. We're going to be looking at how pitchers have performed compared to their projections this season. Housekeeping as usual. We hope you're watching us on YouTube. I have a fun background today because I'm recording this from my house, which is a little abnormal for me. So you can see the wall this is my wall. This is my wall in the house. There are many others like it, but this one is mine. But
what is that? A bunch of dried weed in the back? What is hanging?
No. This is actually this was the lei that that was given to me because I proposed to my now wife in Hawaii, and we were on Oahu, and she's a friend who lives there who was in on the bit. Like, she schemed with me to plan this engagement. Yep. And so when I did the actual proposal, I didn't actually know she was getting this, but she whipped out the leis, which was very cool. So it's been pressed or I don't know, dried out, whatever you want to say, but it's been preserved. It is not weed, John.
I know you well enough to know that you're one of those hippy dippy hop forward folks.
Yeah, I do want to show you this really quickly because it's funny for this. This is a very cool gift that I received one time. It's like a coffee table book. It's the history of the San Diego Padres per the New York Times. Anyone Times? So anyone can buy this for any team. I got it personalized, so it says my name on the bottom, which is very cool.
Nice.
But it's basically any New York Times article about a given team. They will like print it and do this. And so it's like a collection, but I just thought it was very funny because it's very thin.
We did 3 articles on the Padres.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
all Tony Gwynn. It's Tony Gwynn in the steroids era.
Or like Ray Kroc getting drunk and yelling at the team.
That's a good story.
Yeah, it's a good story. So anyway, we've beat around the bush a little bit too much. All that's to say, watch us on YouTube. You'll see all the stuff I was just talking about. Subscribe to us. Again, the number one way you can support the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network is becoming a patron at patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. And of course, as we did in the last episode, we have made a handy dandy spreadsheet for you guys to follow along.
Yeah.
Second screen experience once more. I want to shout out Levi Lawson, who is in my fantasy baseball group, who texted me and complimented us on how much easier it made the episode to follow. So Levi, this is for you. We've done it again. And you can follow along as we talk about how the Padres have performed to their projections. Of course, anything that is color coded in green is a good projection. It's a good performance compared to the projection. Anything that's color coded in orange is bad. And some overall trends that you'll notice, John, looking at that. First of all, not one pitcher on the San Diego Padres is dramatically overperforming their expected K rate. The only major variance from the projections is actually in the opposite direction. We have a couple guys like Blake Snell, who's, I think he was projected. I have it right here. I don't know why I'm guessing. He was projected for an 11.4 K per nine, and he has an 11.65 K per nine. So, yes, he's overperforming, but
is he?
Yeah, is he really like that? It seems like actually he's very in line with his projection. But, then you have guys like Seth Lugo, who, perhaps unsurprisingly because he's a starter and now not a reliever, his K per nine is down pretty drastically. Steven Wilson, probably a little bit more surprising. His K per nine is also down. We'll get to him a little bit in when we dive further in depth for the players. But is that something that surprises you?
I mean, it does and it doesn't. So there's two overlapping kind of trends in baseball. One is that you want to increase the Ks per nine just because that means fewer balls in play. And fewer balls in play means that you're not chancing it on luck. That's kind of our gripe with Tim Hill. It's basically all batted on in ball play luck whenever Tim Hill comes in. It's just I hope he hits it at somebody. And that's all of Tim Hill's quality. And that's really scary. And so that's been a trend for a while. However, there's also been a recent trend where, yes, we want really high K rates, but also we want pitches that have poor batted ball results. That's basically how the sweeper came into play. And Niebla is known for being a sweeper keeper. He in his Trapper Keeper, he always keeps a list of pitchers with sweepers, and he picks those ones out of the bunch. So I could see that he's a person who is kind of a proponent of getting poor contact as a whole, which it could be good for our baseball team overall, while also trying to maintain good strikeout levels. So it's not surprising to me. It's not shocking, at least, but it is a little variance of two kind of trends going on in baseball.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because another trend, a good trend, is that the home run rate for the entire team is quite good and is down for everyone on the Padres except for Tim Hill, who is also just bad. So I don't necessarily know that that's all that surprising. But my thought... Are you busy?
I didn't have my computer on mute. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. But my question for you is kind of bleeding into the last question, but is that philosophy or is that just Petco?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. Because it's not like every pitcher comes in and has a lower home run rate. And we are capturing kind of a portion of the season in which a higher percentage of the season so far has been the season in which it was cold or earlier in the season. We're not at the end of the season where we've been through the whole summer. So there is probably a little bit of increase in home run rate. However, I mean, the same thing with the Ks being down. It does seem like Niebla is somebody who is concerned with having poor batted ball contact or good from the pitcher's perspective, batted ball contact as a strategy, which is a good strategy and would lead to fewer home runs per nine, but also maybe not make your FIP be as good as maybe you would want it because that doesn't take into account the home runs,
John, I have to be honest, I've spun a little bit of a web. And it's a good web. It's a web that you want to walk into because that's exactly right. Looking at the team's kind of other peripheral stuff, their left on base percentage is generally higher. It's literally higher for every player except for Drew Carlton, who doesn't really have the biggest sample size. The team's left on base percentage is currently second in the majors on the season at 75.5%. Only the Toronto Blue Jays are higher. And this is my automatic cat feeder that is going off right now. So
I have one too. Nice.
Okay, cool. Well, everyone's just hearing the sounds of our home. And the team also has the fifth highest ground ball rate in the major leagues at 44.5%. So taking all of these things into concert, I feel like this is a pitch to contact strategy that Niebla is employing this season. And for good reason. The team has the league's best defense, quite literally the best defense according to StatCast. 24 runs prevented, 30 outs above average. And the results show. And just like you said about like, oh, maybe that's not so great for your FIP, but it's good for results. Our team ERA is 3.81, while our team FIP is 4.22. That is the second highest differential between ERA and FIP in the positive side.
I didn't know that
leagues.
before we went in, by the way.
Hell
I did
yeah.
not know that. I did not. I swear to you that I did not know that.
Well, you're just very smart. So that is exactly why you were able to deduce that. Yeah, it's a 0.41 differential between our ERA and our FIP. Houston is number one, by the way, with a negative 0.46. So
interesting. I wonder. I kind of now want to look into their numbers in terms of like K rate and just batted ball quality of contact.
Yeah, interestingly, they are like 8th or 9th in outs above average this season. So they have a good defense, but not like we. I mean, again, it's like we have literally the best defense this year, according to Statcast, which is like pretty amazing. So I put a question that I think we might have already answered, but which is the tail and which is the dog? Is it that the team philosophy is such that it's dictating these numbers, or is it the other way around, where like we are getting these numbers and then we're changing strategy? Like, I don't know if that's a great question, but put it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, right? It's like you want to get good pitchers. Good pitchers tend to have high K rates. You want to get pitchers who can, dominate the strike zone. However, you also want, it's been a huge part of Blake Snell, kind of his turnaround over the summer was just basically him being able to play secondary pitchers in the strike zone to get ahead in the count. And so you want people with a secondary pitch who can throw it in the strike zone to either get it ahead of the count, or if they do make contact with it, make poor contact. And so, the sweeper is known for this, but there's a lot of pitches that you can do this with, like an early count curveball to just get ahead, get me over curveball that also, like, unless they're specifically looking for it, is probably not going to get great contact. So you want both, right? You want pitchers with good stuff and pitchers with good strategy. And hopefully Niebla has made it so that we have both.
So speaking of Niebla and speaking of good things, we've had some very pleasant surprises this season from the Padres 2023 pitching staff. I think we can say that the biggest surprise and the kind of the biggest plus mark, so to speak, biggest check in the plus column has been Michael Wacha. He has been exceptional, truly. His frontline stats: 3.65 FIP, a 2.68 ERA, 2.1 WAR, which is really a matter of the fact that he's only thrown 90 innings, because of course he's been battling some injury and missed a really decent chunk of the season. But I have some really specific things I want to talk about with Michael Wacha, but I'm wondering if there's anything that you wanted to throw in to start the conversation off.
I can't hear that name without thinking of like one of our least popular episodes in PAR history, our Michael Wacha episode. Which, by the way, like in that episode, one of the things that he has a great changeup and he keeps the ball in the zone, so he really makes you beat him, which is just good for a veteran pitcher to do. And one of the questions that he's continually trying to solve is being able to put any kind of spin on a baseball, if he can develop like a slider or cutter, and he really hasn't, and he's still being very successful, and his ERA is basically the same as Blake Snell's. Per inning, his WAR is better than Blake Snell's. He's just very obviously had a successful season, and I think that we'll get into like a little bit of contract talk later, but it's basically just that he's been overperforming, or at least just performing very well. Like, you can't fault AJ at all for that signing. And he's also just one of those players that, like, when you evaluate the season thus far and you think, how is it that we're struggling? One of the main ways that you would think that we're struggling is that, like, we picked wrong on our like accessory pitchers, and we've had pitcher injuries. And it's like none of these things have happened. We've had relatively good health outside of Musgrove, and even his is like not terrible health. He's had almost 100 innings so far. And like the Wacha's been overproducing or producing very, very well. Like, what the hell? Why are we not winning more than we're winning?
Yeah. So, have you been tuned in at all to the pitcher list stat that they've done? That's like a pitch level value or pitch level average. Have you seen that it was referenced in that Hassan Kim article this week? Okay, it's really cool. I'll try and link it in the show notes for people. If you're familiar with like Stuff Plus, Pitch Plus, or PitchBot, it's another similar like grading metric where they basically take the physical characteristics of a pitch and they say, okay, like, this is good, this is bad. PLV is what's the abbreviation for it, and it's on a 0 to 10 scale. So where 5 is average, anything above 5 is good, anything below is bad. But then what is really cool that I appreciate is they have a different scale for it, which is called pitch level average, which they scale to ERA. So you can look at a specific pitch and it's like, oh, its pitch level average is, Michael Wacha's pitch level average is 3.4. So like based on the quality of his pitches, he has like a 3.4 ERA quality is basically what they're saying, which is very good.
Yeah.
And then they do it on a pitch by pitch level. So you can, it's like expected runs over 9 innings pitched, which, that's why it's like, it's almost like an expected ERA per pitch.
Yeah.
And if you're looking on screen right now, you'll see I'll put Michael Wacha's chart on there for 2023 pitch quality. But the thing I found so interesting about him is that he has 5 pitches total in his arsenal. A 4-seam fastball, a cutter, a sinker, a curveball, and a changeup. And his fastball, cutter, his sinker, and his curveball are all like basically average pitches. His sinker is not that great. To put that in perspective, its pitch level average is a 4.89. So if you think of 4.89 ERA, not very good. But he only throws it 12% of the time. The other ones hover somewhere around 4, so kind of an average pitch. But his changeup is literally, John, the best changeup from a starting pitcher in baseball, according to this metric. And it's like not even particularly close. So the top 5 are Austin Gomber with a 2.52, Bailey Ober with a 2.43, Lucas Giolito with a 2.42, Tyler Wells with a 2.23, and Michael Wacha with a 1.40. It's the best among starting pitchers, and it's the second best in baseball. I think Yennier Cano on the Orioles technically has a better one, but he's a reliever. So what Michael Wacha's kind of secret to his success is throwing 4, really 3, but 4 serviceable pitches and 1 like absolutely elite pitch. And he throws the changeup a third of the time, and he just bounces all his other pitches off of that changeup. And it's worked for him so far. It's certainly limited the damage in terms of giving up home runs per 9. He was projected to give up 1.51 homers per 9 according to Zips, and he's only given up 0.79, so like literally almost half of his projected rate. He's leaving guys on well above his projection at 82% left on base. His BABIP is slightly lower than his projected, a 2.50 BABIP this year against a 0.277 projection. So, and of course, as we mentioned, his ERA is a full run and a half better than what his projection was. So, really, really, really interesting stuff from Michael Wacha. And I suppose it might be time to play a game with Michael Wacha. Is that true, John?
Let's play a game. Yeah, I just want one comment on it, is that I don't know this statistic, so I don't know how they measure it. I would be curious whether they, like Stuff Plus, measure a changeup based on your fastball rather than in isolation.
They do. Yeah.
Okay. So he has in the past year like changed his changeup a little bit in that it has lower, like all his pitches have lower velocity, but its velocity relative to its fastball is now even lower. So like a wider difference between the fastball and the changeup, and it has a lot more drop to it. I do wonder whether Niebla kind of is a changeup whisperer as well. And so he's getting more horizontal run as well as more vertical movement while throwing it a little bit slower, while also just like maintaining like pinpoint control. That's just basically arm side corner every time. That's making it, just a quality pitch overall. Some of that, the command part of it is something that sometimes you can't control, but the shape is something that you can control, and he's throwing it as his primary pitch basically now at like 32% of the time, where he's never had it as his primary pitch before. So, I mean, there's some things that you can look at. I'm gonna be the agent, and I'm gonna say specifically that you can look at that and say that, I mean, you got to pay him for this. This is a good player going forward, and so the game that we're gonna play is signing Michael Wacha to a contract. He has the opportunity to opt into a contract, and the team also has the opportunity to opt into the contract. I haven't looked at the specifics, but I think that it's 2 years, 32 million is the team option to opt in, and
Correct.
I think that his is 2 years, 16 million in order for him to opt in. Is that correct?
It's 3 years. He has 3 years left. He has a player option after every season, and each player option is $6.5 million.
Yeah, so he's not. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say that we're gonna decline that, obviously, right? So the team option is 2 years and 32 million. So right away, are you opting into that or not opting into that? 2 years, 32 million.
I personally, if I'm general manager of the Padres, I'm clearly not speaking for AJ Preller. I would not take that club option. I would try and negotiate a different extension.
Okay, but so I'm the agent, but I'm also someone who is trying to kind of expedite the deal and try to get you. I'm not going to go wildly on one side, and hopefully you won't on the other side. But like, you're at least debating that, right? The 2 years, 32 million. You're like, if that was 2 years, 26, I might do that probably.
Yes,
right?
I probably would do that. I'm in that fringe area. And if I'm AJ Preller, again, I'm kind of thinking of the Nick Martinez situation from last offseason as a model for this one, where, okay, like, yes, Nick Martinez was better than we thought. And so, we're going to tear up his deal because his deal before the season was like 4 years, $28 million with, like, again, a player option at the end of every season. And so what we ended up giving him was another 3 years, and I want to say like $32 million or something like that. So it's like I'm gonna have to give you more money than the 32 million or than the 18 million that you would be getting in your player option for sure. And you're probably going to be asking me for a longer amount of time. So the question is going to be like, how far apart are our ranges and average annual value? And that's what the game is going to be here.
Yeah, and so I'll just set this up. Go to any player on Fangraphs and scroll all the way down to the bottom, and it'll tell you what Fangraphs thinks that their value has been the last few seasons. The last 3 seasons, 3 full seasons for Michael Wacha, he's had in 2021, $8.7 million valued year. In 2022, a $12 million year. And then so far this year, he's already generated $16.6 million, which means that over the past 3 years, he's been worth, what is that, 36, $37 million or so. And this is the part that I don't want you to hear as the agent, but my client is like 32 years old. And so I am going to be, like you said, trying to go for a little bit of longevity. So I'd probably start with like trying to get a $4 or $5 million, 4 or 5 year contract. But I'll just, to expedite this process, move down to 3 years and $39 million. Would you do that?
I would not do that, and let me tell you why. Because you said that he has averaged, $36 million or something in value over the last 3 years. So right away, you're asking for more money than value you've generated on average over the last 3 years. The other thing is that, again, you don't want me to know that your client is now 32, but I do know that.
Yeah.
So you have a declining asset. This is a car that has been driven off the lot a long time ago. And as already witnessed this year, it is prone to breaking down occasionally. And the check engine light is coming on. So here's what I am preparing to do. I will give you it's going to be 3 years total, okay? But the first 2 years are guaranteed at $10 million a piece. Okay. The third year is a third year also at 10 million, but in your second year, it is a vesting option that says that you have to throw 100 innings. If you throw 100 innings in 2025, then your option vests. Justin Verlander has one of these in his contract currently.
Okay.
So this is something that we've seen. The option vests, and you will then, get it. But if not, then you will become a free agent at the end of 2025. So what do you think about that?
So you did make the argument that he's getting older and older, but the thing that you failed to take into account is that his value is increasing year over year. He's actually getting better in terms of like his value, and his changeup is the best that it's ever been. So I would say that, yeah, he's getting older and pitchers can fall off a cliff, whatever, but like it would be hard to argue that next year you're suspecting that he's not going to be this quality of pitcher per inning. So I would still want a little bit more. I would start with 12 million, but I'll go down to 11 million per year with the same deal, but instead of 10 million every year, 11 million every year.
So with the vesting option.
Yeah. So 2 years, 22 plus the 11.
Okay,
Vesting.
2 years, 20. So it has the potential to go to 333.
Yeah.
Let me just think for a second. Okay, here's what I want to do. I'm going to counter with a slight restructure. I'm going to give you the same. So you're asking for 3 years, 33, with that third year being a vesting option. Okay. I'm going to say the first year at $12 million, the second year at $8 million, and then it vests in the third year at $10 million.
So basically, you're just pushing up the
I'm
money.
Pushing up some money. I'm pushing up some money.
But I've had plenty of long-term years, and so by you pushing up the money, I'm actually losing money in that because, like, now I can't invest that. I mean, now it's not growing with inflation. So, and if anything, you're giving me less money right now by doing that.
Yes, I'm basically moving around.
I already have money. Yeah, but I already have money, so why would I do that? I don't want to. I want the most.
I want you to take my original deal, is what I'm saying.
No, I'm not doing it. Yeah, so, you want me to take a worse deal, really? Like, no, I don't want to do that.
Okay, I'll do just for the sake of the show continuing. 3 years and $33 million. So 11 million a year for the first 2 years, and then a vesting option for 100 innings. I personally love the vesting option. The vesting option, I think, is underutilized. I think the mutual option fucking sucks because, like, it never happens. It's like bullshit. It's just like, oh yeah, and like if we somehow agree to be in the same term, like whatever. But vesting options are cool as shit because it like has these performance incentives baked in and has some protection and et cetera, et cetera.
I agree. If you're like a Justin Verlander who would just like never accept a move to the bullpen, but like, do you think that you could like kind of fuck someone over in the same manner that you could like screw over Nick Martinez by being like, oh, you're a 1 inning reliever and we're doing it based on innings? You know what I mean? Like Nick Martinez's total value should be higher than it is.
I mean, you can also like bake in provisions. Like Martinez also has incentives in there for being a reliever as well. So, you're not, that is a safeguard that's in there. I also think that like as the Padres, you would be hampering your ability to win in the name of saving a few $1 million, which doesn't seem like, for all the criticism that we have for the Padres organization, it actually like doesn't seem like something that they do. So, thankfully that's the case. But okay, fair enough. Let's talk about Seth Lugo, and then we can do this for Seth Lugo. Seth Lugo rules. We're very happy with how he's performed this year. Yes, he got absolutely fucking demolished in that inning by the Dodgers, but he's rocking a 4.16 ERA and a 3.94 FIP, which, those aren't like amazing numbers. Those aren't remarkable numbers. They're league average numbers, but league average with length. He's thrown nearly 100 innings from a guy who is a converted reliever. And we're only paying him $7.5 million this year. And he's provided us nearly double that in terms of actual WAR value. dollars per WAR. So he's an absolute coup for the Padres this season. He is the main way that he's really gotten his shit under control is that he's really tamped down on his walks. His walks weren't even like that big of a deal to begin with, but he was projected to put up 2.88 walks per nine, and that number's down to 1.94. So nearly a full walk per 9 innings. It's just pretty amazing. And his ERA is a little high, especially after that Dodgers blow up that he had recently, but he's also stretching out to being a starter, and like a fourth or fifth starter who is putting up a 4.1 ERA, like you will take that like every time. So I'm very happy with Seth Lugo. What about you, John?
I mean, absolutely. I feel like it's hard. He's already pacing to easily clear 100 innings. That's already was a battle that we were hoping to get from him. He is a guy who I thought, in terms of strategy, if you're like a playoff team, a guy that you can kind of ride as your fourth, your fifth starter, and then move into something of more of like a bulk guy during the playoffs, or even just a middle relief pitcher during the playoffs. But a guy whose stuff would play up in the bullpen, because we've already seen that is a thing that he can handle. I thought it was a good strategy overall, and in reality, it's worked out well for him, but just not maybe for the team in general, where like we're on the verge of going to the playoffs and transitioning him. Because I do think that like right around now is when you start to like maybe try to get him more into maybe a 4-inning but dominant role, maybe a 3-inning but dominant role for the playoffs. But now it's like that whole strategy is kind of a little bit screwed over.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about Seth Lugo is that he's kind of doing similar things to Michael Wacha, but in through a different way. His fastball is actually his kind of standout pitch according to Pitcher List's grading system. It has a pitch level average of 3.11, so it's a very, very strong pitch. We're getting into the 85th sort of percentile in terms of like how it grades its fastball. And then he throws a bunch of other like pretty average pitches. His curveball, which obviously he throws just as much as his fastball, and it's kind of what Seth Lugo's become known for, is like smack in the middle, considered to be an average pitch by this grading system. But I think it's what makes his fastball so good is that he's able to kind of play it off of this curveball and get some of that good tunneling action we talk about. I mentioned the fastball just to kind of put in perspective what that 3.11 pitch level average is in context. Among starting pitchers, that is the 9th best in baseball. He's right below Joe Ryan and right above JP France. And some of the pitchers that are above him are Pablo Lopez, Shane McClanahan, Freddie Peralta, Sonny Gray, Garrett Cole, Zach Wheeler, and Spencer Strider. So Seth Lugo is only worse for his fastball in terms of all those dudes, according to this metric. So that is very cool, and we like Seth Lugo. So I want to keep him in San Diego. What's it going to cost me, John, as his agent?
Oh, that is a great question. All right, so same thing. He transitioned to a starting pitcher role, so he's been much more valuable this year. And my client is a starting pitcher from now on. I think everybody can agree on that. So he's been worth $14 million this year, but in the last few years, he's only been worth about $2 million per year as he's been in the relief role. And basically, every time he's been in the starting pitcher role, he's just been worth excess of $10 million every single time, just because of the sheer bulk that he's giving. Also, if he is playing for a playoff team, like I said before, I do enjoy this thought process of the strategy of having him be a fourth starter who is somebody who can be dominant one time through in the playoffs, which is like all that you would want out of your fourth starter in a playoff position, or even a third starter, honestly, if you had the bullpen depth. He does, I would say that he's even older than Wacha. He's 33 years old, so 1 year older. He got a 2-year, $15 million contract this year with a player option at 7.5, I think it was this year, coming up. So I'm gonna want a little bit of a premium on that. I would probably do the same thing as the same Wacha deal, except for I don't have the vesting option. 2 years, $22 million. You taking it?
I'm not taking that.
That also is like my 60th percentile. So I'm like not trying to be like gouge you at all. Like I think that's like a little bit more than I would actually expect. Like a tiny
Yeah.
bit
I
more.
mean, here's the only reason that I wouldn't do that. I think if this was like a player in a vacuum who has a history, I think I'd be very comfortable giving that deal. My biggest concern is that this is the most innings that Seth Lugo has thrown since 2018. He hasn't thrown more than
Yeah.
80 innings in a season since 2018. So, and even then, the most he ever threw in a season is 101 and a third, and he's easily going to pass that this year, assuming he stays healthy and his shoulder doesn't launch into the sun like Joe Musgrove's. So I'm concerned. Like I'm concerned about his long-term health. I'm concerned about, how that fatigue is going to build up. Like, John said, he's even older than Michael Wacha. So I'm not going to go for 2 years and 22 million. What I will do is give you 2 years and 18 million. So that's 9 million per, but both of those years are guaranteed. Are you taking that?
I don't think that there's any way that he's not going to get 2 years, 20 million on the open market. I honestly don't. Like me, not even as an agent trying to gouge you a little bit. I think that he'll get 2 years, 20 million.
Well,
so it's like
I'm countering you, so we're basically asking to meet in the middle. So are you saying we're going to meet in the middle? 2 years,
yeah,
20
sure.
million.
Like I'm thinking that's like the fair argument for him going forward.
Yeah. So that gives some potential
being an
for,
agent,
some value to be made on the Padres' part, and some value potentially to be gained from Lugo if he doesn't perform. So we're giving him that extra year of security, and I'm glad that both sides are happy. In terms of some of the other kind of good stories, I feel like we've talked about Snell and Hader a lot. Do you want to touch on them quickly?
I mean, we've talked a lot about them in the context of whether we should trade them or not.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, so yeah, so Snell especially because out of the two of Hader and Snell, I think that Snell is the one that I think we could probably both agree is much more likely to be a target for us in the offseason. And he's having a great year. I think last I checked, he was like fourth in, like, if you were to bet on the Cy Young, he was like fourth, and which makes sense because he has 136 innings at a 2.65 ERA. His peripherals suggest that he has been a little bit lucky, which is not surprising because he has an incredibly high 5.6 walks per nine, which suggests that and an over 85% left on base. So it does suggest that he's getting out of a lot of jams, which I think that all of us have seen that he has got out of a lot of jams, which he has great stuff. So he has the ability to get out of jams. However, at some point there's going to be a blow up inning or two that's going to inflate that ERA. I would think, in fact, his rest of season projections are actually higher than they were at the beginning of the season in terms of ERA, probably because of that walk rate. So the thing that I'm nervous about going forward is that Blake Snell is going to have his best year. He's going to have his Robbie Ray year, and then we're going to sign him to a Robbie Ray deal, and then we're going to get Robbie Ray-like results.
Yeah. And I would agree with that for a couple of reasons. First of all, fun fact, John, this is the most innings he's thrown as a Padre in a season, and it's only the middle of August.
Whoa.
He is at 136 innings, and before that, he hadn't gotten past 128 and 2/3. It's also the most innings he's thrown in any season in his career, except for his Cy Young year in 2018. So,
damn.
This is a dude who does not have a history of being a workhorse, and I could see, especially because of the implications of going into the next tax threshold and what we've talked about for international money and the Padres wanting to preserve that, et cetera, et cetera. It makes it a lot easier if you sign someone to an extension rather than going and getting a qualifying offer candidate. So I could really see the Padres working on extension, and I could really see the Padres overpaying, and I could really see that just adding to our woes of dudes who are going to be here and aging and making a lot of money and not giving us a lot of production. Blake Snell's not actually the youngest of, Wacha and Lugo. He's only 30 years old now, so next season will be his age 31 season. But again, Snell's going to be looking for at least 5 years. He's going to be getting that on the open market. And I mean, you have the example of Robbie Ray, like you said, and Kevin Gausman, same time, like 5 years and 125 million, somewhere in that range. Musgrove, again, also avoided free agency, but signed a 5-year, $100 million extension. I would say that that's definitely the floor, and I would say his floor is a lot higher than that, given the walk year that he's having. So I'm at once excited by the idea that Blake Snell will be a Padre because he's like one of my favorite guys to follow. He's clearly likes it here. The vibe is great. And I'm also like terrified that we're going to get like put into a position where we're going to give him a massive extension that is not going to provide nearly the value that it's promised. So that's all really I have to say about Blake Snell. And I mean, again, it's like, if you watch any of the broadcasts, like you've heard this ad nauseum, but like it truly is remarkable that he might like lead the league in strikeouts and walks. Like, like that's like so like insanely ridiculous. Like I think this is going to be kind of like a stat head favorite season to talk about in the future, especially if he goes on to win the Cy Young. So that's it for Blake Snell. Josh Hader is like amazing as a closer, and also like I think is like number one on my shit list as a Padre. He's having like an unbelievable Josh Hader, everything that we were promised year. And also he has put the team in incredibly compromising positions because of his unwillingness to pitch more than 1 inning. And there have been lots of situations this season which are the result of the offense's inability to perform in some situations and sheer dumb baseball luck, where we've been in these positions where we have to protect really close games. And Bob Melvin's hands are tied because Josh Hader won't come in and to protect the lead. So it's really unfortunate. And this is a guy who like on paper is like one of, if not the best closer in baseball. And I'm in a position right now where it's like I don't even want to consider giving him an extension because I'm like maybe being a little too emotional about it, but like it's pretty ridiculous like what's been going on. Am I overreacting, or what do you think?
So I want to remind you that we were a pro labor podcast. I want to remind you of that. And I do wonder, so he's looking for the biggest paycheck of his life, right? That's just what and so when you go through arbitration, especially when you're on the Milwaukee Brewers, you get screwed by these little ticky-tack things where you could be like, oh, you had a great ERA, but you didn't have a lot of saves. And it's like, in reality, it's like, yeah, because you used me against the heart of the order every time, whether it was the 8th inning or the 9th inning, and you screwed me out of money. And I could see you doing that on the free agent market as well. I do wonder whether after he gets paid, suddenly you're allowed to use him, how you would actually want to be able to use him, because obviously it doesn't make sense to use Hader against the bottom of an order. Like basically you should never do that in general.
Yeah,
like
sure.
unless you just took the lead in the 9th inning, right? Yeah. It should be like I'm using Hader for the best hitters, and whether that's the end of 7th, early 8th, that's the end of 8th, early 9th, or that's the 9th. Now is when I should use him, and sometimes that'll be for 3 outs, sometimes it'll be 4 outs, whatever. But that's not how we're using him. We're using him in a manner that is not super helpful for the regular season. It's somewhat helpful, but like less helpful than like Seth Lugo's been so far, and would be helpful in the playoffs if you got to use him exactly how you wanted to use him. And so, I mean, part of it is like an overlap of like us being terrible during the regular season when we had such high stakes, and it being like his pre-free agent contract. So I could imagine a manner in which you could argue like, yes, I want the best pitcher over 1.0 innings in baseball to be on my team. But as soon as you sign this contract, dude, you gotta fucking do the thing that I want you to do, and not just run up your numbers by facing whoever happens to be up in the 9th when you have the lead, so that you're automatically going to get a save. and like a third of the time you're going to be facing the bottom of the order, you can make the argument to me that it's worth it. But if he's not going to play ball, then it's just like, no, that's not worth it at all. Like, not at all. You're paying him only for the playoffs? No way.
Yeah. So, that's it for Josh Hader. Also, he's walking a lot of dudes compared to his projection. Like, I mean, and he's in terms of he's the biggest. I don't know why I'm going to say based on balls per 9, but I'm just seeing BB/9, and I'm like, I don't know why in my head for a second I couldn't say the word walk. He's the biggest walk for 9 ? And also the biggest home run per 9 ? As well in the other direction. Because he's giving up 1.5 more walks per 9 innings than he was projected to. He's currently walking at a 4.64 walks per 9 rate against a 3.07 projection. But he's also still only given up 1 home run this year to Mookie Betts, and he's that's put his homers per 9 at 0.21 against a 1.07 homers per 9 projection. So he's doing like really interesting stuff, and like his sinker is graded out as like one of the best pitches in baseball by pitch level averages. No surprise there. So I'll be intrigued about where Josh Hader lands, and I'll be really happy to accept the qualifying offer bonus pick from him and say thank you very much. I hope you have success elsewhere, because I do not want to pay Josh Hader $20 million a year, which is what he's going to be asking for. So I guess like really quickly, let's talk about Pedro Avila, because he's fun, and I know you want to talk about him, John. So I'll give you the stage, and then I'll come in and put some rain on the parade.
Yeah, and one, that has to be the one homer that Josh Hader's given up. Like, oh my God.
I know.
And I don't know. Like, he's just been a frustrating player. He's a great player, but he's been very frustrating. Yeah, so Pedro Avila has been a wonderful surprise. He's the dude that no matter what he does cannot earn a higher like pecking order spot for Bowmel. He has to have an ERA under 1 in over 22 innings and just be like, nah, bro, you don't get any playing time at all. But so okay, let's just set the premise for what we accept as why we like Pedro Avila. So I am not going out here saying, you know what he is? He is a starting pitcher for us next year. He's a 4 or 5 starter for us next year. I'm just going to throw that out. That's not what I think that he is at all. He has performed much better than that so far, but that's just not what I think that he is in like the 22 innings or whatever that he's had. However, there are some signs for him that make me excited. And it's primarily that he has a curveball that has a great spin rate. It has great whiff numbers. It has poor contact numbers. And he has a changeup that he's able to like float up there that has also had very great results. And so he has a fastball that he throws with good velocity that gets kind of destroyed, but it gets destroyed partially because the shape of it is terrible, and partially because he literally only throws it on like 0-0 counts and when he's behind in the count, which in reality is a great strategy for him because he's basically trying to get ahead in the count, and then now you don't know what pitch is coming. I'm going to either like float something up, I'm going to spin something up, you might get a fastball, who knows, but you don't know what pitch is coming. It could be one of 4 pitches. The sinker is his other pitch. And so once he's ahead in the count, even though he maybe doesn't have like premier stuff, you don't know what's coming, and none of the pitches are going to be terrible. They're at least going to have like a high spin rate or a very low spin rate in the case of the changeup. And you want to put that in play, do it at your own risk, because the batted ball results on the changeup and the curveball have been poor so far. So that's a valuable thing if you get it for cheap. You know, it's a Nabil Crismat plus, and that's somebody, you know, Nabil Crismat basically only had the changeup and he was floating it up there all the time. At least Avila has a fastball that he could sneak by you occasionally at the, 95, 96, 97 miles per hour mark, while also having that changeup that he could float by you, or a curveball that he could hit spin by you with, great whiff rates. His whiff rate on his changeup is over 50%, 55%, and the whiff rate on his curveball is 44%. So like he's better than he was, and he's flipping things up more. He's not throwing his fastball, which was not good like he was in the past. So he's just a better pitcher than he was before, and good enough to be like a swingman.
So, yeah, I agree with you about everything you're saying. Like, he was nothing, and now he's maybe something, and that's better than
Yeah.
nothing. And he's also very cheap, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to say that I'm rooting for Pedro Avila really hard. Matt Fryer Ben posted in the Discord today about how when he came over in 2019, he pitched 5 1/3 innings against the Arizona Diamondbacks, was sent down to Double-A, and then on his very next start blew out and had Tommy John. And because of that, instead of if he had gotten injured in the major leagues, he would have been paid, a major league minimum salary and accrued service time during that time, which, was like at the time was like $500,000 or $600,000 a year. And instead, because he blew out in the minors, he was paid the minor league rate, which is like $800 a month. So really, really awful luck. And I'm like, really, really excited for the idea that this guy might end up being something. The only damper that I wanted to put on this is that, 22 1/3 innings, his sample is really small. He's performing really well in that. There are some things that are just like really simply unsustainable. Luckily his BABIP is literally in line with his projection, which is, a good sign. His homers per nine is low and his K per nine is up, and that's really cool. But I had to point this out. I literally bolded and underlined it and italicized it in the spreadsheet because I was like, oh my God, I've never seen this before. His left on base percentage is 97.66%. So I think that means that literally one base runner that he's seen has scored in his 22 1/3 innings, because the other home runs the other earned runs he's given up have been from home runs. So that is like very cool, and I've never seen that, and also like not sustainable probably past his next start or next appearance. Enjoy Pedro Avila while we can. And John, let's transition into talking about, maybe some of the things that have been a little bit of a letdown so far this year. We're going to gloss over some of them. Obviously we have some really obvious ones, for instance, Tim Hill, who, if you look at his spreadsheet, is not overperforming on anything. He is in fact underperforming in terms of his homers per nine, his BABIP, his FIP. Certainly is he's rocking a 5.14 FIP against a 4.28 projection. He's provided negative 0.25 WAR for us. So, and I think it's still on the Phantom IL. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Yeah. Very
thank
clearly.
God. Like,
oh yeah, no, but it's very clearly Tim Hill has this like magical hip thing that just all of a sudden popped out the moment he started sucking. He's gonna be sitting on that for a while. Luis Garcia, and then I'll toss it back over to you to talk about both these guys. Listen, we know Luis Garcia is not been performing. I think to a certain extent he's gotten a little bit unlucky. His BABIP is up. He's not leaving guys on base at the rate that he was projected to. But when it comes to like the meat and potatoes, like FIP things, his homers per nine is above what he's projected, and his walks per nine is a full walk over what was expected. And he's not striking out guys like he used to. So, he is really supposed to be like a traditional right-handed power arm, and he's really not this year. And it's very sad. But he just seems like one of those guys that we've talked about, John, where like, you get to that, I think he's like 36. He's not even like that young.
He's literally 36. Yeah. He's 36 and 6 months.
Yeah. So yeah, guys just kind of age and fall off a cliff at a certain point, and we might be at that point for Luis Garcia.
Yeah, I think we're at the point for both of them, honestly. I mean, Tim Hill's 33 years old, 33 and a half, and he's been terrible. His ZiPS projection for the next couple of years are 0, negative 0.1, and negative 0.2, and he is still ARB eligible, so he'd be looking at probably a raise on the current 1.9 average annual value that he got for this year. So it's like, are you going to tender him a contract when you know that you probably have to pay $2 million or more? Probably not, right? And same thing with Luis Garcia. I mean, he's a free agent, but it's like you're not going to pay him. So I think that, yeah, say your last words to those two players, because I don't think they'll be Padres for much longer.
Yeah. Joe Musgrove, he has had a season that is really in line with his projections in every way except for a big one. He has thrown about half the innings that he was been projected to throw. And my guess personally is that he does not throw again for the Padres this season. I think a lot of that is dependent on if they, make a run in the playoffs, and it's going to be the sort of thing where if they're getting close to a wild card spot, and then he starts rehabbing, it's like, okay, maybe they try and get him out there. But if the Padres continue to perform in the way that they have performed, certainly at the point we're recording this on Friday night, August 18th, then I believe that the Padres hopefully won't do something dumb like risk his health if he's still feeling a little bit iffy. But I've been on record on the main show as saying this is basically all a symptom of him trying to pretend like he is not hurt, and so doing weird shit. And then when you do weird shit to try and act like you're not hurt, you end up throwing your mechanics off, which has been well documented. And then you do more weird shit, and then that weird shit hurts you again. Instead of just like waiting and resting to get better. So, any other thoughts on Joe Musgrove?
I mean, I would take the over under on the 0.5. I would take over, and not because I think that he should, but I think because he will. Like, he's the Padre who I feel like no fan has ever been like, who doesn't try hard enough? Joe Musgrove. Like Joe Musgrove will be out in a AAA rehab and fucking diving for baseballs to try to get someone out, and you're like, don't do that, Joe. Don't land on your shoulder against like some like Reno, like don't do that at all. But he is a person that cares a lot. He cares probably just as much as you or I or anybody else in the Discord or anybody else listening. And sometimes that's a negative too, because he's been chasing his own tail all season long. From the second he dropped that kettlebell, he's been chasing himself to a negative end all year long. And he's still a good pitcher. He's still like, he's outperforming himself in terms of ERA. His xERA has been 3.13 in 100 innings. Like, are you kidding me? I'd take that every day of the week, every year of your life. But it's been a frustrating year, not for lack of effort, but just because like sometimes effort gets in the way of intelligence.
I'm going to do some quick hits on some dudes, and then we want to get to Darvish, because I think Darvish is going to be a little bit of a bigger conversation. But we talked about Tim Hill. We talked about Garcia. Nick Martinez. Listen, Nick Martinez is actually like incredibly in line with his projections. Like, I think he's the only player on the spreadsheet who doesn't have a color-coded square. Like, everything is like basically in line with like what was expected to a reasonable degree. My perspective on Nick Martinez is that they took the thing that made him useful, and then they took that behind a woodshed and shot it in the face, apparently. Because he was not meant to be like a 1 inning high leverage reliever. He was meant to be like a Swiss Army knife, multi-inning, either coming in and starting as your fifth starter, or being a great swingman, or whatever. So I don't know. I hope they don't do that anymore. I wish my analysis was better, but I hope they don't do that anymore, John.
I mean, I don't understand how they did it in the first place. It seemed like there was a very good strategy going into the season, and that was to kind of have Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo provide redundancy for one another, in that they're both like end of the rotation starters who can give you, a lot of innings, about 100, 120 innings, and then transition to kind of that bulk reliever role in the playoffs. And that strategy at some point fell by the wayside, and suddenly Nick Martinez is the seventh inning guy. And it's like, how much better is Nick Martinez than like literally anybody in the seventh inning? Like literally anybody, even in AAA, like, or even like just calling up like Kevin Kopps. Do you think that he couldn't provide a 4 ERA in the seventh inning? Like, he probably could. Pedro Avila, anybody. But that's not his value. His value is that he can provide 3, 4, 5, 6 innings of that 4 ERA, and then transition into a little bit, like it's a bulk role for late season. And it's like, what did we do with Nick Martinez? I don't even. The problem with Nick Martinez isn't Nick Martinez. It's the strategy with Nick Martinez that kind of frustrates me.
Yeah. Ray Kerr, really quickly. I don't think he's had enough of a sample. He's only thrown 14 innings. And I think he's really just been bit by some bad luck in those innings. He's given up a lot of home runs, so that's not good. But his walk rate is very good against his projection. He was kind of a wild guy down in the minors, and he's only thrown 3.14 walks per nine, which is good considering his projection was 5.75. His K per nine is also up against his projection, but he's rocking a 6.28 ERA, which is obviously not good because of the aforementioned home runs. He's has a 368 BABIP, which will definitely not sustain itself over the long run. Neither will a 56.18% left on base percentage. He was projected for 72%, so that is like way off his projection. And I think if he just gets more innings, that will change, especially given the fact that his FIP is only 4.52. So if you have that much of a dissonance between your ERA and your FIP, something kind of fucky's going on. So, I can just chalk that up to 14 innings. I'm not worried about Ray Kerr, and I think he's exactly what we think he is right now, which is like a fringy left-handed guy out of the bullpen. And maybe we get some upside based off of that. Any additional thoughts?
Yeah, so when we traded for him when we traded for him, I said in the Discord that Ray Kerr is going to be a great example of whether we've actually changed our pitcher development, because he's a left-hander with great arm talent. He's like Ryan Weathers in that fact. And the problem is that he has god-awful shape. He has no spin. And what we've done so far is we've eliminated basically all of his secondary pitchers. He used to throw a changeup, a slider, a sinker, and a curveball. And we've gone so he's only basically throwing a four-seam fastball and a changeup. Like very rarely he'll work in the changeup, but it's mostly just the four-seam fastball and then the curveball off of it. And still, he has no shape on it at all on his four-seam fastball, to the point where, like, yeah, there's a lot of velocity, but it's always going to get smashed when hitters are looking for it. And his curveball is performing very well off of it, probably because everybody's looking for the fastball, though, more than actually the shape of the curveball itself. And he does seem to me so far to be a failure in development, which is what makes me sad about Ray Kerr.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't categorize this next guy so much as a failure or disappointment. He's had slightly disappointing peripherals this year. Steven Wilson, who started out really hot, and we were big fans of on this show. Against his projections, his strikeout rate is down, his walk rate is up. He's had some of that, I think, better luck.
It's gooder.
Yeah, his BABIP
gooder is actually proper.
Yeah. His BABIP is quite low at 218. His left on base is also quite high at 81%. So he only has a 3.44 ERA, but his FIP is 4.61 and his expected FIP is 5.29. So, kind of some danger signs there from Steven Wilson. So I would categorize him as a slight disappointment, but I want to hand the mic off to you to talk about Yu Darvish, because Yu Darvish has not had a bad season. Like I just want to say that he's going to be right in line with his innings pitch projection. He's walked a few more guys than maybe we'd like. He's been bitten by some unlucky BABIP, but other than that, his numbers are like pretty in line with like what he was projected for. But potentially trouble ahead, John.
Yeah, and this is in reference to a Fangraphs article that came out recently, but to be fair, their bias is such that they always thought this was going to be a bad contract that we gave him, and a huge portion of that is because he's 36 this year and is under contract through 2028, so he's just going to be in his late 30s for the entirety of this contract, which is just a dangerous thing to do with pitchers. And he has underperformed in terms of ERA, but basically in terms of everything else, he's performed just fine so far this year. It really comes down to, should you pay a 36-year-old pitcher who already has a huge workload? And the Zips projection suggests that, like, definitely you shouldn't. Like, definitely not. Their suggestions are that he's going to have about the same ERA that he had this season, which is about a little bit over 4 ERA, 4.2. And then they had to like make the computer suggest that he won't be cut after like 2025 season which is something that they did with Eric Hosmer as well, and they like forced the computers to like suggest that he wouldn't be off the team, and in reality they shouldn't have never done that because he was off the team when they said that he would be off the team. So it does make me a little bit concerned that like at $18 million average annual value, that is a good number for 2023, and it'll be an okay number for 2024, and it'll be a terrible number for the rest of the contract, I think, almost for sure. Where he'll be like a fifth starter or just fall off a cliff because he's 38, 39 years old. And there is something that they're probably not taking into account, which is that when you have that many pitches, you're able to like flip up whichever pitch is working that day and kind of like Rich Hill it to success. Like if there's going to be another Rich Hill, Darvish is like a prime candidate to just like put out like like squeeze out a WAR, like squeeze out 1.5 WAR, which the computers don't say that he will, but I would imagine that that's possible. But it's like, oh my God, we paid him a lot of money for what seems like mostly the 2023 and 2024 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I agree with your assessment. One of the people that comes to mind in terms of like crafty people who worked into older age is Greg Maddux. I'm not saying that Yu Darvish is performing quite at that level, obviously. Do you know how much career F4 Greg Maddux has put up, by the way? I'm just curious. Off the top of your head. Like a ballpark.
I mean, I'm guessing that it's gonna be a huge number because I'll say 80.
He put up 116.7 career F4.
Damn.
Yeah. In 22, 23 seasons and just over 5,000 innings, which is like absolutely absurdly ridiculous. In his age 41 season with the Padres, he put up 3.9 F4, which is just like so insane. But I could see when
Jesus, yeah,
I know
wow.
I could see when Yu Darvish's velocity really starts to dissipate. We could see him try to go that Maddux route and get really crafty with his stuff. But again, like for $18 million, like you need him to be the best version of that. And hitters in 2024, 5, 6 are just going to be better than hitters were in 2007. I know that's not that much time, but it's still time. Yeah, some trouble.
My counter argument though
Mhm.
is that there's also like a little bit of a narrowing of the archetype of pitcher, wherein almost everybody is doing only a couple things, which are hitting the top of the strike zone with a four-seam fastball, breaking a curveball off of that, or getting a fastball like on the middle inside part of the plate, arm side, or a off-speed pitch off of it. So like there's a lot of similarities in pitchers, and you just have, if you are crafty, I could see, just because you're like, this is not the guy that I saw yesterday, almost like a knuckleballer, but from a pitcher's standpoint, like a pitching standpoint, where you're just throwing off people's rhythm. I could see it working. It's just not happening.
Yeah. All right. Well, as usual, absolutely blew through how long I thought this episode would be. But I think we can wrap up maybe with some more overall thoughts and some positivity. I think that like there were some pleasant surprises this year. There were obviously some things that we're a little concerned about. But John, how do you think things are going to shake out in the near to long term future?
I don't know, but I do know that it is kind of we have two paths that we could go into, and these next like probably 2 years will be very interesting, both in terms of like strategy and just like how we are developing folks / who we're going after. Because while we have a lot of money put into pitchers, we almost exclusively, besides Darvish, have them on short-term, well, Darvish and Musgrove have them on short-term contracts, such that our 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th pitchers, so basically everybody except for Darvish and Musgrove and Suarez, are coming off the books this year. So there's going to be a lot of turnover, which could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. Do we have that like flexibility? Yes. Do we have assurances that will be good next year? No, not at all. So it'll be interesting to see, like, at that inflection point, what we decide to do. There's a lot of degrees of freedom, and it could be such. I mean, we've kind of actually hit on a lot of our free agents recently. Um, like Lugo worked out. I think that just a win. I think that the Wacha signing was just a win, and I could see us getting another like fourth or fifth starter that are a win. And I don't know whether that's AJ Preller. I don't know whether that's Ruben Niebla. I personally think that it's probably Ruben Niebla being like, oh, I can make this guy a little bit better. And then only making a pitcher 5% better is going to make him a lot better in terms of MLB success. And I do think that there's some positivity going forward in terms of, with our degrees of freedom, with the amount of money that we can spend, we could possibly, depending on our philosophical approach, go after people who, with all our ballpark, with the things that we are good at, limiting good contact, are successful going forward. Despite the fact that there's a little bit of concern about like who exactly is going to be in the rotation next year. Are we going to have the depth? The depth was a concern this year. We're starting Rich Hill. Are we going to be starting a Jake Arrieta archetype next year at some point in the season? I'd say that's a possibility. And I also say that there's a great possibility that we sign, 2 more Lugos.
Yeah. Yeah. I am also really optimistic solely for the fact that I think what we've seen this year is a philosophy from Ruben Niebla and the pitching staff in terms of pitching to contact, trying to create poor batted ball results. And when I see like kind of trends like that, like over the course of an entire pitching staff, it makes me think that like at least the the pitching coaches and everything, they're firing together on all cylinders, and they're really bringing a real philosophy to that. So I don't know if we're going to have people like Ray Kerr who are potential like development failures in the future. Like we'll see. I know that we have a really cool young crop of pitchers that are coming up that I think in the next couple seasons are going to have a chance to make an impact at the big league level if AJ Preller doesn't get too trigger happy and starts selling them off. But I do have, of like all the people who are not named Bob Melvin on this coaching staff for the Padres, I really have a lot of faith in Ruben Niebla. And I'm like really happy that he's our pitching coach. And I could see him becoming a Darren Balsley 2.0 who's with the team for 2 decades and retires, having been with the Padres and everything. So, I think that there's a lot to look forward to for the San Diego Padres on the pitching front. Anything else, John, before we wrap this up?
No, please, please, please like, subscribe, comment. I swear to you, it helps us. And if you made it this far, then you're a diehard Padres fan who I think should support other diehard Padres fans so we can grow our community.
Yep, John said everything I was going to say. You've been watching Pods Above Replacement. We're going to come to you next week with another episode that we don't know what it is yet, but I think depending on how the Padres play in the coming week, it might dictate what we want to talk about. So for John Precoda, I'm Raphie Cantor. Thank you so much for watching Pods Above Replacement, and we will see you next time.